Here we go. Tonight we're gonna have a very special guest. For me, it's just an inspiration. I went to a town hall last year, and I was open to a lot of new conversation when it comes to theater. I remember she invited a couple of guests that it opened a world of possibilities that I feel like it was a really great idea to open this conversation to Miss Allie Gorrie. How are you doing?
I'm so good. And sorry, I had to unmute myself.
There you go.
I'm wonderful. I'm so excited to be here with everyone.
Great. So, for the ones who don't know Allie Gorrie, she is an amazing human being. She is an actor. She worked in regional theater, off Broadway, on tour. She's also an inclusion consultant for to help theater companies, organizations, educators to make their communities more accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. And she's also the co-producer of the series Able, a new doc series in Amazon Prime. So I don't know how I can say more words. I just want to leave it up to Allie to kick off this conversation.
Wow, thank you so much, Malcolm. I am just so thrilled to be here sharing with you all. Like Malcolm said, I'm Allie B, actor, inclusion consultant, just advocate and teaching artist. I'm very excited to be able to share with you tonight. Thank you so much for being here. It says so much that each of you decided to show up and make the choice to learn and to work on building a more inclusive theater community. We are lucky that I think a lot of us came to the theater because we found it such an inclusive safe haven for us as artists. And so I think it's also because we felt that it's our job as artists who are mission driven to make these environments inclusive and welcoming so that we can foster the growth in more artists. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you all. We're going to talk tonight about how all artists can serve as allies and advocates really for folks with disabilities and artists with disabilities. These are some steps you can take and also just practices that might seem new or you hear these kind of words. It's like when Malcolm said when we were at the town hall a few months ago, a lot of these concepts aren't that difficult and a lot of them cost no money to implement, but we just haven't thought about it yet. So we're going to dive right in and talk about the importance of serving as an ally for the disability community. You may not know this, you may know this, but disability makes up the largest minority in the world. And in the country, I mean, people with disabilities are the most unrepresented on stage and screen. And that's really in the world as well. So largest minority group, most underrepresented, period, the end. And before we dive in on ways that we can serve as allies and be helpful, it's really important that we have some basic general knowledge about disability so that we can make the most informed decisions when we are showing up to be of service. So when we're talking about disability, it's really important and okay that we say the word disability. I think in history, we've really come a long way to get us to the point of being able to say the word. Some of you may have heard different ways to sort of skate around saying the word. For example, you might hear, oh, my friend who is differently abled, or the person who is handicapped, or I mean, there are some really, really not so kind terms out there that have been used over history, but at the time, those terms were acceptable. And as we grow and evolve and change, terminology changes with us. And so it's important, yes, to keep an open mind, but just know that as a non-disabled person, you can say the word disability. It is not going to be a problem. Also, one question I get really quickly before I move on to my next point is, so if you are referring to someone with a disability as someone with a disability, your question might be, well, what am I? What am I if I don't have a disability? And the correct term for that would be you are non-disabled. A lot of folks say, well, I'm able-bodied. Well, here's a fun fact. I have low vision, so I'm totally blind in one eye and have very limited vision in the other eye. But I can do the splits and tap dance and a bunch of other things. So my body is able, my friends who, are on wheelchair basketball teams, like their body is able. So able body is not the term. It is simply I am disabled or I am non-disabled. My second point is the use of person-first language. So you might have heard me say, I am a person with a disability. I'm a person with low vision. There is a lot of movement now towards maybe some identity-first language, like I'm a blind person, but the safest bet as folks who are showing up as non-disabled allies is to always put someone's personhood before their disability. Because the disability, for people who have disabilities, they really don't see their disability as their sole defining factor. For example, I often forget that I have low vision until, something comes up in the day and then I'm like, ooh, I can't see that. But I don't wake up in the morning thinking, all right, another day living with my disability. Like I just live my life. And most folks do the same. We're not always thinking about our disability all the time. So as far as language goes, the person is who you value and who you want to talk to, not their disability. So we put the person first. This is the idea. This next bullet, I want to just give everyone a little insight into the two ways that society over time has viewed disability. And the first way is the more old school kind of outdated way that still sometimes exists, but it's the medical model of disability. And that says the person with the disability is the problem and they need to be fixed or taken care of, or, they can't do anything by themselves. The social model of disability says the person is not the problem. The problem is the barriers that our society has created for the person. So a person is not disabled because of the way they're born. They're disabled because the way that the world does not accommodate. The world is built for a non-disabled person. So just to give you a little taste of medical versus social model, the work I do as an inclusion consultant operates out of the social model, right? So when I go to a theater and consult on maybe a new space, well, if we're creating a new space, let's make it accessible from the beginning, right? Like let's build for accessibility. So that would be a social model move to make. Also, just to consider, disability is not just the disabilities you see, right? We might see in New York City, actually, I remember being so, it was just an awakening to me to see disability so much, where we are living, where you're seeing 1 million people every day. But you also have to think about the percentage of disability you don't see. If you look at a person, you can't necessarily tell if they're deaf, if they have low vision, if they have a chronic condition. You can't always make that assumption. So just, it's important that we all find that empathy and that understanding that so many disabilities we can't see just by meeting a person even. So it's important to consider that. And disability, again, makes up between 20 and 25% of the United States population. So it's a lot of people. Throughout this presentation tonight, I might use the abbreviation PWD, which stands for a person with a disability. And that's in the disability community, we say that term a lot. Disability is the only club any one of us could join at any time, right? An incident or a medical procedure or something could happen tomorrow. You have no idea. And it's really important when we think about disability to realize we are, one step away. You never know. And when people are living with disabilities, oftentimes they use what we call accommodations. Now, in this presentation, want us to be able to reframe the word accommodation into a success tool. So, for example, if an actor with autism needs more time with a script, it's important for us as theater artists and theater makers and maybe people who sit behind the table at auditions to not think of an accommodation of, oh my gosh, I have to send this script out a week early. Like, what a pain. No, what an amazing opportunity to facilitate the success in another actor. So when you're giving accommodations, hopefully, or thinking about accommodations for other artists, think of them as ways to see that artist do their absolute best work. And last but not least, disability is often the last group of folks to get a seat at any kind of inclusion discussion or equity and diversity discussion. It's sort of the last group of folks to get asked, and a lot of times disability isn't considered minority. So it's just important to understand, and when you are trying to seek to have more inclusive discussions, it's why I'm so thrilled to be at this HOLA talk. It's a thrill to be able to have these kinds of conversations and share, because so much of the time we forget that disability exists or deserves a voice. So that was a lot. That was kind of a crash course in Disability Inclusion 101. So forgive me if I am talking at the speed of light. I just want to share all this information with you, and I get really excited about it. But this is why we're here today. We're here to really figure out ways that we can be allies to artists with disabilities, ways that we can show up as maybe people with disabilities or non-disabled folks, to just make our industry, make the theater industry a more inclusive place. So I'm going to share these 10 ways with you. And some might seem really obvious and like, well, of course. And then some might be like, wait a minute, I never thought about that. So, and when you're viewing these and listening to these, I want you to think about maybe things you've already implemented as an artist or as someone who maybe works at a theater or works in the arts, and maybe things that you haven't thought of. So let's just dive right in. First of all, we have to talk. I know it feels very like we're in this like age of all the self-help books and all of the like, go get your goals. But if we want our industry and the theater community to be more inclusive, we have to take the steps. We can't just say, I want it to be inclusive. We have to set the right goals to make sure that inclusion is happening and that it is being measured and tracked and people aren't falling through the cracks. So I think it's really important for theater organizations, any arts organization, to set incremental goals. That means like a quarter of the year goal, like a 4-month goal, a 6-month goal, a 12-month goal. So by making these smaller incremental inclusion goals, like for example, if I'm a theater company, maybe a goal might be my ensemble will include, 20% of my ensemble will have a disability, just like 20% of Americans have a disability. So those kinds of goals can be tracked and measured. And if you get into the habit of setting these incremental goals, you'll start, implementing these inclusion practices without thinking. This is an example, like I was just telling you, but you can also set specific goals for your project. So just say you're doing a new play series. Maybe you could have a goal and there's a deaf actor in the play, right? Your goal would obviously be, well, our goal is to cast a deaf actor as the deaf role. Or, our goal is to cast, it really depends. But, it's having those project specific goals is another way for you to take those steps to really track if you're walking your talk. Because a lot of theater companies have mission statements that talk about how inclusive they are, but very few of them are doing what is necessary to make sure that inclusion is happening across all groups and across their whole season, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to be one of those people that is helping a theater company or that is running one or that is working as an actor to think about how could I contribute to making this more inclusive? Who could I invite? Do I have any friends who are disabled actors? How could I elevate their work? So goal setting. When people with disabilities see that you're walking your talk, they're going to show up at your auditions. Again, it's like I said with mission statements, a lot of folks with disabilities have been really disheartened because, for example, like we all know, Actors Equity has a diversity and inclusion statement. But what you might not know is that a lot of times if you show up to an equity audition and ask for accommodations, they don't know how to help you. So actors with disabilities need to see theater companies not only stating they can be inclusive, but taking the right actions. And the next slides that I will share with you will help you take these actions. Also, fun fact, this picture, you can see kind of part of it in the slide. I don't know if can't really tell what you can see because I can barely see, but it's a show called Bastard Jones, and it was really special because the cast literally mirrored the like makeup of America in terms of race, disability, gender. It was fascinating casting because they were committed to a cast that mirrored the world around us. All right. Ninth freeway, or second freeway, really, use person first language. We talked about it. If you're seeking to hire artists with disabilities, or you're seeking to work with artists with disabilities on your projects, say that, right? Say, I want to have an artist with a disability in my project. Using the right language also lets artists with disabilities know that you have maybe talked about this before or have researched or care enough to know that they're not defined by their disability. Next, it's important that if you seek to work with actors with disabilities or include actors with disabilities in your projects, to reach out to champions in the community who work with disabled folks. These are some examples. On this slide, I have Queen's Theater, which is an incredibly inclusive organization that we could all learn from. I learn from them a lot. But they have trainings for actors with disabilities. So if you're looking for actors with disabilities, guess who's a great place to contact? Queen's Theater, because guess who they trained? All of those actors. Collab Theater Group is in New York. They are an incredible theater training company for adults with developmental disabilities. And then on my right, you have a picture of the Perkins Music School. This is a music school that has, it's comprised of totally blind musicians. And it's incredible. And there are a lot of music schools like Perkins. The Lighthouse in New York has a school, a music school, and the talent there is remarkable. And they have incredible instructors that, you know, have taught these blind and low vision musicians for so long. So it's important that if you are a theater artist seeking to collaborate with folks with disabilities and you don't know where to start, look at the folks doing it, because they have people that they will gladly send your way. We all want to support each other, and as a disability community, we want to see each other succeed. So it's important that you let these community champions and these organizations know who you are and what you're about. Because what's going to happen if you don't do this kind of work ahead of time, and you maybe hold an audition that is, you say, okay, we want to include actors with disabilities, but nobody came. Well, how did you do the reaching out beforehand? Or did you just expect that if it said people with disabilities, people would come? There's this idea that if we build it, they'll come, but no, you have to really show that you're willing to show up and to be of service. Next, oh my gosh, our favorite thing, the old casting breakdown. We see these all the time as actors. And now that we're thinking about it through a disability inclusion standpoint, I wonder how many breakdowns we've seen that have been inclusive to the disability community. I know, let's all like rack our brains and try to think. It's few and far between. A diverse and inclusive casting breakdown has to go beyond the standard inclusion statement that is on the Actors Equity website. And that is because of what I said before. Countless times, artists with disabilities have showed up to union auditions and they have been very excluded. So we have to go beyond that as theater artists that want to make change. It is our job to, and if we're actors, and if you're on this call and you're thinking, I'm an actor, like I don't have a theater company, I don't do this kind of work, but you want to show up in service, think about the theater companies and the places where you've worked before, or your university, and you can contribute there. So when we are writing an inclusive breakdown, it's really important to be clear, right? So we don't want it to be long, drawn out. It could just be seeking a deaf actor for this role. Seeking or especially looking to, because I know there's a lot of red tape around what you can and can't say, but especially looking to see artists with disabilities for this project. And not only that, but what will make you a star ally is if you talk about what kind of accommodations you can provide. And maybe it's just a statement at the end of your audition breakdown that says, we seek to be inclusive to artists with disabilities. If you need any accommodations, reach out to us and we will try our best to help you here. It can be your own statement. but it's important that if you do want to include artists with disabilities, that you know that you can show up for them, and that you're willing to show up for them and listen. It's so funny. I was just doing a corporate training, and I was talking about how, like, you know, when we all have meetings as companies, how many times have you seen on a meeting, you know, memo or calendar request, let us know if there are any accommodations you need? Like 0 times. So it's just a new practice. It's, you know, do you have any access needs? That's all you have to say. And you can work on it in a very private way. So let's keep going here. Here's some sample breakdown language you can read. I'm going to move my little squares to the top of my screen. So where is my mouse? Hold on. I'm having some blind girl problems. Actually, Malcolm, would you mind reading these breakdowns for me?
Sure, definitely.
Okay, great.
So it says, breakdown of the, for the wolves. In reference to the information below, these are the descriptions of the characters as identified in the script and in collaboration with the creative team. They are not meant to be exhaustive of who should play these roles, as we seek to cast as expansively and authentically as possible. As ADA Complaint Theater, we welcome performers of all abilities and will make all reasonable accommodation in order to cast performers, regardless of disability, in any role possible. This is a play that requires athleticism and an aptitude for soccer, but we recognize this can be achieved in many ways.
That's my favorite breakdown I've ever seen, especially because it's literally a play about soccer and they're trying to make it work, right? That is special. Actors Theater of Louisville is special. Okay, here's another breakdown. These other two, Malcolm, are very short, but these show the example of clear as kind. So here's another one.
All right, breakdown for Molly Sweeney. Particularly interested in seeing blind or low vision actors for this role.
That's an example of clear as kind, right? They said exactly who they hope to see. Finally, here's another one.
Breakdown for Otherworld. A cast of all and no genders, ages 18 and up, all ethnicities, disabled and non-disabled performers who are strong, dynamic singers, actors, dancers with creative, collaborative instincts.
Yes. So here's some examples of some sample breakdown language. A really great thing you can do as an artist who shows up as an ally is, if you see a breakdown like this, because I do this and I feel like I'm the only one, so like, let's go and join together. Write that casting director and say, I really appreciate the way you wrote this breakdown. I appreciate your commitment to inclusion. I appreciate the work you're doing, because casting directors are so unsung, and they are just the ones who are thrown tomatoes at all the time. And it's important that we lift them up when they're doing the work of inclusion. So that's our breakdown language. Let's keep going. All right, number 6. It's really important, if we want to be more inclusive, to provide information about our auditions, our shows, our theaters, our rehearsals, the classes we teach. Provide information as soon as you can and as much as possible. So for example, if you're holding auditions, it's really helpful to folks maybe who have autism or who are a part of the neurodiverse community, to give them information so that they feel like they're set up for success and they know exactly what to expect, because that's super important. So maybe it's as simple as providing detailed and very specific directions to your audition location and your breakdown. So it's not just, we're auditioning in Pearl Studios 519, studio 412. No, it's like, okay, here's where the studio is. It's this far from the train. Take the elevator up, and then you'll take a left and then another right, and you're at 5, whatever. But that kind of information is not only going to help, it's going to help folks with multiple disabilities, because I certainly know I always think about this for some of my other pals with disabilities, but as someone with low vision, if you could just tell me where to go in a detailed way, that would ease up so much of my stress of, oh my gosh, I can't read the numbers of the rehearsal studios. I can't read the numbers of the building. Like, be specific in how you help and how you provide directions. Also, it might be just something to try. You can write a brief summary explaining how you run your auditions on your website, on your casting breakdown. If you are someone auditioning and maybe you're an actor, maybe this is something you could bring up to some theater companies you've worked at. But if I saw on a website, like, oh, this is exactly what I'm going to expect, that is going to ease my mind so much. And it's really going to help a lot of folks with disabilities. One of my favorite new things that I'm helping companies with is adding videos to our websites about, here's what to expect when you come to our theater. Here's what to expect when you come to classes with us. Here is a video talking to you about the accommodations that we provide. Just to let people know and sort of to go ahead and foster that warm, inclusive, inviting environment from the get-go. Because if I see as a person with a disability that you're taking the time to like let me know what accommodations you provide, what you can do so that I have a great experience, oh my gosh, I'm going to throw all of my money at you. People with disabilities, we forget that that's 25% of our country that has income, that is ready to spend it. So as people seeing theater. So that's another thought. All right, cruising through. So our next two are very similar, but if we are people holding auditions or we are folks at auditions, we got to think about accessible sides, accessible music. Offering sides in accessible formats might mean large print. It might mean black background with white writing. It might mean that if an actor says, it really helps me to have the sides ahead of time, that you can send them a digital copy. For some folks, it might really help to have audio sides, like someone actually speaking the sides, because that's how they process. And that's what they need to succeed. It's important not only to offer them in accessible formats if someone asks ahead of time. So for example, maybe someone just needs the sides period, send them. Maybe someone like I know I do, I say I need the sides in a 20-point font. That means I would like them in a 20-point font. Sometimes people will send me the PDF and they'll say, hey, can you just make that bigger? And the answer is no, like you can't really do that to a PDF, like you have to do it in a Word doc. So type out the sides. And then it's important that if you make those accommodations before your audition, that you also have accessible sides at your audition. And a really easy start would just to have a set of large print sides for each role. Here's some example of accessible formats. This is a large print sample of the Glass Menagerie on the right. A real classic here, but we're going to talk about, I just mentioned, if you send sides ahead of time, send them to folks in a Word file. PDFs often can't be edited or enlarged, and they might not be able to be read by certain screen readers for blind folks. I know it's extra work to type the 3 pages of sides on Word, but it makes all the difference because it is going to foster more inclusion in your audition. We talked large print, at least 18-point font, preferably higher, and bolded. And spacing out the sides just like this is super helpful so that people can track where their lines are, right? Because when we see plays in like the old Samuel French format, it's like line, 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 line. And they're all smushed down together. So spreading them out and enlarging the sides helps. Again, we talked about sides in audio formats. We talked about sending sides ahead of time. Also, we don't think about learning disabilities, but that really helps folks with learning disabilities. And again, if you're offering those sides ahead of time in that accessible format style ahead of time, offer it the day of your audition as well. All right, really getting down to the end here. Just got a few more. Third to last, be an audio describer for performers who are blind or low vision. This is a really free and easy thing you can do, even if you see someone in your rehearsal process or in a studio or whenever, but especially if you're seeking to include that population. When you're holding an audition, and this has only happened to me, and I've been in hundreds of auditions. I've only been in one audition in my life where the casting director audio described the room. And let me tell you that made all the difference, because if someone has, low vision and they're coming into your audition, or at least I know when I walk into a room, I can't see the people behind the table. I can't tell you how many people are behind the table. And sometimes I'm not sure where the accompanist is if it's a musical. So what you would do if you want to serve as an audio describer would be to meet that actor at the door, which is just also just a kind thing to do. Open the door for them, let them in, and then say, hey, just so you know, like, this is how our room's set up today. Our pianist is all the way to the right side of the room, and behind the table, you've got, the director, choreographer, and producer. And then you might describe them, or they might at that point stand up and say, hello, like, it's so nice to meet you. It really makes the whole audition setting a little bit more human. And that way, folks with all kinds of disabilities don't feel like they're in this unknown void. Really describing the room and describing who's in the room can also help folks who need that like extra time to prepare and like ground themselves and ground all of their senses. So just know that being an audio describer, yes, it helps blind and low vision people, but it helps others as well. Lastly, if someone is coming with their caregiver, their friend, I know if I'm going to somewhere for the first time and it might be an audition in a new space, you better believe I'm going to recruit someone to help me find it. And some folks might travel with a caregiver or friend. So it's important that if they are at your audition or at your theater or rehearsal, that you make sure that you speak to them rather than their caregiver. If this is a big kind of faux pas in the deaf community, but a lot of times people will speak to the interpreter instead of the artist who's deaf. So it's really important that your focus is always on the individual with a disability, right? They are the ones in control. They are the ones speaking to you. They're the ones coming into your audition to do the work, or coming into your theater company or your rehearsal or classroom or whatever facility. So it's really important to speak to that individual. And lastly, when a person with a disability tells you what they need, believe them. Folks with disabilities have to fight for basic accommodations their entire lives, going through school, getting a job as an adult, and if it's an invisible disability, I might say even more so, because, oh, well, you don't look blind. You don't look like you deal with this. You don't X, Y, and Z. Listen, right? Be a listener, hold space for that human being, and be kind. So just know that if they say that an accommodation is necessary, take that to heart. Really take that to heart. Some additional tips. Oh, this is my friend Lolo in this picture, and she's just so fierce. We could all take some fashion advice from her, but we're gonna keep moving here. If you want to include deaf talent, it's important that you work with a director of artistic sign language for your show, because sign language in the theater is going to be a little different than conversation sign, right? There's an art to it. And it's really important to have that kind of person, especially if it's on stage stuff, right? If you just are seeking an interpreter for your piece, it's different. But if you seek to have deaf artists in your show, include a director of artistic sign language. And if you need resources there, I've got you. This should be obvious, but hold your auditions and hold your rehearsals. Even if you are just, someone who wants to show up and make sure that you're inclusive of more people, check where you're rehearsing. There's nothing worse than, I have a great friend who, happened to just win the Tony in Oklahoma this year. You all might know who I'm talking about, but she has showed up for countless auditions, and they're on the second floor of a building with no elevator, and she's a wheelchair user. So like, if they say they're being inclusive, but these auditions are held in spaces that aren't ADA compliant, what? Make sure your auditions are in ADA compliant spaces, and it's very easy to find out if they are. And most places know. Like, for example, in New York City, I've called like Alchemical Studios, over on 14th Street. And, they're great. They're a really cool studio, but not super accessible. That's, you just have to know. Check your assumptions. It's very common that folks make assumptions about the disability community without even taking the time to get to know them and get to know their strengths and talents and insane abilities. I mean, take a minute and pause before making your assumptions. It's so important to be a listener. I'm about to sneeze. Hold on. Excuse me. It's so important to be a listener in this time. Ask actors, ask their representation if they have reps. You can ask their managers, hey, what accommodations does this actor use? So that way you're ready, right? And in the audition process and the rehearsal process, just be a listener. You don't have to be superwoman, superman, superhuman. Last, disability, or maybe second to last, but it's not a monolith, which means that actors with the same disability might need drastically different accommodations. It's important to stay open, right? Just because you've had one actor who's a wheelchair user doesn't mean that you know how to accommodate every single actor who is a wheelchair user. Just so you've had one actor, who is autistic. That doesn't mean everyone is different. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's accommodations are very different. So stay open and curious rather than being like, well, I thought I knew how to do this, because that's when we get in trouble. And that's it for me. So if you have questions, if you want to go into deep dive discussions further, reach out. I love talking about this stuff. I'm here to talk about it, and I'm here to kind of wade through all of the good times and the bad times. And, things happen. Rehearsal processes happen that are not super inclusive. And the amount of shows I've been a part of as an actor with a disability that, the theater company says, we want to hire actors with disabilities. And then you show up and your first rehearsal is on the second floor and there's no large print and the interpreters haven't been found yet. It happens all the time. So it's important that you also know what tools are available so that you can stand up if you see this kind of thing happening. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And if you want to open it up to any questions or thoughts, then we can go for it. But
sure. As of right now, we're entering to a part where everybody is open to do a question. If you want, you can unmute your mic. Also, you can put your question in your chat, but feel free to do your question if you have one. In the meantime, I just want to ask one thing that it also really helped. It was a real discovery for me when I went to a town hall, and how I approach the way I talk about like PWD. I remember I was really fearful of how to address it. Can you help us, share a little bit of how it would be okay for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like anything, it takes practice, right? Even my own parents, they're like, my dad, I've been legally blind since birth, and they still call it like, oh, you got that vision thing. Like they still do, my own parents, right? And I love being an advocate for this community. So, hello, we also just have to have empathy for like generational things, but it takes practice. It takes practice to say the word, to say disability, but also to, mess up sometimes and be like, oh God, like I don't know what to say. Or like, I have a lot of friends who say, I'm able-bodied. Oh wait, no, that's not right. And I'm like, whatever, like work through it. It's okay to say the wrong thing. It's okay to say, if someone says differently abled, I'm not going to come over here and be the police. Like they're trying. So you also have to just like be gentle with yourself. There are some people that will be the language police. I try to just like nod my head and then like maybe shoot you an email 2 weeks later. I'm just kidding. I won't do that. But just practice.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
I would just like to say thank you for the information. Allie, I actually saw you on Able, the series, so thank you very much for doing that.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful you saw it. Thank you for watching.
And thank you very much for actually opening this up, because these are the same issues we deal with every single time we do work. I'm a writer, but I would like to work with theater. I would like to work with work with actors for monologues and so. And I would love to do that. So thank you for this information. And my commentary is basically, I'm not the language police either, but I would like to actually say that you have to be direct with the people that you're working with to actually educate in a good way, in a nice way, in an educated way, if I can say it that way. You can be lenient, but you also have to be strong-pointed. But I find that if you're strong-willed and strong-minded with a certain language, people can actually feel that you're attacking them when you're actually not. You're just trying to show them what is your language,
Right.
not correct them.
Exactly.
And certain cultures are not as ahead of the others as they should be.
Yeah.
Because I'm in the Spanish community, and we still say handicapped in Spanish, whereas in English you say disabled or non-disabled. You still have language that is a generation behind, but it's the same thing. So you have to update in a good way, in a culture-sensitive way as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful for me to know as well. I really appreciate you sharing that. Really.
And you'll find that in different languages as well.
Yeah.
That certain cultures are behind because of the language, not because of the concept.
Right. Oh, wow.
So just to say that. Oh, and I would like to connect with you further to actually talk about this.
Please, I'm here for it. I think my information is in the comments, but I'm here to talk, and I would love to connect more.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Roberto, do you have a question?
Hi, yes. Well, first of all, of course, thank you so much for this space. I was able to join a little late with my partner. She's here with me on the phone.
Hi.
Sí, hola.
That is
I'm translating. She doesn't know much English. We're here in El Salvador. I lived for 10 years in New York. We actually, with Melissa, who's my partner, we produced the first inclusive play here in El Salvador recently. It's a play with 13 actors, 6 of them with Down syndrome. And we want to take it everywhere, you know. So I would also, like Christina said, I would also love to stay in touch with this community, with you guys. I'll put my email down there. Maybe there's something we can do in the future. I lived 10 years in New York. I don't know if I said that. We would, but I'm based in El Salvador right now, and we would love to take it to New York, take it anywhere we can, you know. Melissa was asking me, she would like to know, in your experience, Allie, what is the disability that you see mostly in auditions?
You know, I don't think there are enough artists with disabilities auditioning to say that I see one more than the others. There is a very tight-knit group of, especially in New York, the deaf community. There's like New York Theater for the Deaf, and they have a lot of like their own thing going on, but they also, because we've had, for example, like the Spring Awakening revival and the version of Big River that we had in New York. And there are a lot of shows that are incorporating deaf and disabled actors, but deaf talent is, I would say, is what we might see the most. But I honestly don't think, and neurodiverse talent as well. But truly, I don't think there's enough of us pursuing it at a professional level at the moment, or like at when and those are the rooms that I'm in, a lot of Broadway, off Broadway, tour situation kind of rooms where we're not seeing enough to even have statistics, which is a bummer. And we could talk for days about why that is. Like, I honestly think there needs to be more education for disabled artists, because a lot of times, just as an example, I'll show up to a film and TV class and I'll tell them, you know, I really want to study this. I can't see the camera. And they'll say, I don't know how to teach you. I'm sorry. And that happens to a lot of disabled people. like, you know, my friend, one of my closest friends is a tap dancer who is an amputee. And he'll show up for these Broadway dance auditions. And before he lost his leg, I mean, he was bound to be, you know, a Broadway dancer. He's incredible. And he'll show up in these auditions, and he dances with a peg leg. And one, you know, his other leg has his tap shoe on it, but he'll show up and they'll be like, what? Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm here to audition. Like, but people just, it's changing those perceptions of disability, and that takes time.
Yeah.
Does that bring?
Wow.
Sorry, Roberto. Yes, please.
Sure. No, I wanted to ask my partner if she wanted to ask anything else. Ella mencionó que es la comunidad sorda, básicamente. ¿Hay algo más que quieras saber? No.
No.
Okay.
Gracias.
I'll explain your longer answer later to her.
Yeah.
Sorry, nothing. What do you say?
No,
Thank you
please.
so much, Allie.
Of course. Thank you.
I have like a big question is, so you also said about education. How can we more accessible with education? You know, how can we lend a hand? You know, like how can we, you know, for example, if we're doing playwriting class, if we're doing production class, how can we make that material accessible? There's like a lot of things to learn.
There's a lot. So first of all, there's a group on Facebook called the National Disability Theater Discussion Group. And it's a group of folks primarily in the States, but there are folks in the group from all over. And it's a big place where we share resources. So for example, you know, I'm teaching a class for a theater company that is primarily for actors with autism. And that company posted the link to their class there. And because a lot of other folks there teach people with autism, they share it with their network. So if you're seeking to look for folks who want to elevate your work, that's a great place to go, because we all want to see each other succeed. Like we all want the inclusion numbers to go up. So that's a great place to look. Also just reach out to me and we can talk all about education, but it's letting folks know that if you're teaching a class that you can provide accommodations and that, you know, all artists are welcome, regardless of disability status or whatever you want to say. It's your, create that statement that you can really commit to.
I'm really curious because I feel like, you know, I don't know what's I'm trying to say it in a way that again, this is me struggling of how
just
to
say it. Just say it.
Say it, Malcolm. She said, just say it.
All right. So, for example, I understand that, you know, we have the assumptions all the time that, you know, we are really clear in the breakdowns, you know, but also I put myself in the experience of somebody PWD and having this experience of going to audition and always have the same thing. It's kind of like disempowering in a way of I want to be there. I want to show up. So when we're saying everything about you know, casting breakdown education, it should be more empowering also to add that special thing of people with disabilities are welcome.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of, I always say, like, if your company or your theater or whatever has an inclusion statement, like it shouldn't just be on your website or your brochure. Like if you are really committed to being inclusive for people with disabilities or any, you know, marginalized group of people, let your artists know that like you will show up for them, and you can create your own creative way of saying that. But yeah, and put it on your audition materials, put it on your, you know, website, put it everywhere, because it's going to take a lot of times for people reading it to really believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was thinking a lot about like the experience. You know, I remember in the town hall, I remember who was it? My God, she was with autism, and she said,
Nicole.
Yes, that she was saying that she had like a bad experience being in a dance call because she needed to be in the back row, and when they switched lines, she was not feeling safe, and you know, all those different kind of things are so like for us.
It's like it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. The amount of times, I mean, I've gone into a dance call and I say, hi, I need to be in the front row right by the choreographer, and I don't switch lines because I am legally blind. And then they'll be like, but you dance? And I'm like, yes, like, just let me do what I do. And then they're like, how do you dance though? And it's just, it happens so much that I've almost like, it sucks that you say I expect it to happen, but like if you're an artist with a disability pursuing a career in the performing arts, like you've been, excuse my language, but you've probably been like shat on so much, and you've built up so much resilience, excuse me, that you are just ready to go. And you are, over time, if you're pursuing this at a professional level, or if you hope to, you have to build that resilience, and it sucks. Like it's not fun for us. But a lot of people, I think, pursuing the arts at a high level who have disabilities have probably had a mentor or 10 who have instilled in them, like, if you want to do this, like, let's go. Like, it's going to be hard, and you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. And because of that, it's why I give these kinds of presentations to people who both do and don't have disabilities, because what a gift for someone else to be able to do the advocating, right? Like I, have been in experiences where I'll have a friend that knows me so well, and they'll tell the lighting designer, like, hey, this girl has trouble in a blackout, so just like fade to blue for the first few tech rehearsals and then fade to black, or whatever. And when someone does a little thing like that, it makes a huge difference. Like it's the littlest things. Or like, what if you went to your next audition and just asked the monitor at the table, like, are there accommodations today? Will there be, you could just, even if you don't need them, right? It's planting the seeds of like reminding people that they need to step it up with their accommodation game, or whatever game they're playing, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's trying to figure out how we can also be allies for other people, so they don't have to do the work all the time and feel so exhausted by it.
Yeah.
Hi, Malcolm. I have a question.
Yes.
Samuel, do you want?
Yeah. Hi, Ali. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I have a question. Maybe the answer is yes. But this exists like a repertory of play that has in the characters like disability like characters with disabilities. My question comes from, because in HOLA we're creating a kind of library with plays, mostly in Spanish. But I guess by the fact that we are able to see or having closed plays where even the main character, even the story is around a main character with disabilities, or just there is a character with disabilities, it might call the attention of people, say, oh, why I haven't think about this. Maybe we can open more chances to have more plays produced with those topics, or even with the topics, or either with characters that demand people with disabilities, and we can open more opportunities. I don't know.
Right. I totally agree with you. And I think what's so exciting is like when we think about whatever play you choose to do, right? Like I gave the example of The Wolves, which is a play all about soccer, for crying out loud. But like, you have people with disabilities in the play, and you never talk about their disability. Like, you just cast someone who has a disability in the role, right? Because think about all the times you've seen people with disabilities in movies or on TV or in books, and they have three pretty much stereotypes, right? They're like the underdog who like comes out at the top, like, and everyone's cheering for them, or they're like this kind of grotesque character, or they're like a dwarf, or like a gnome, or they're a fantastical character, or they're like a superhuman, kind of like their disability is a superpower. And we never just see like the guy at the grocery store who's, stacking the shelves. Like, what if he happened to have a disability? What if like the woman in the office just happened to be in a wheelchair. So that is important when we're looking at plays, but also if you're looking to, research and find plays by playwrights with disabilities, there are databases for that. And joining groups like the National Disability Theater Discussion Group can help you find those resources. I know, again, in New York, Queen's Theater has a whole database of disabled playwrights. So Queen's Theater is a great place to look. But yes, like everything you're saying, yes, yes, yes.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Does anybody have another question? Yes, Roberto.
Hi. We struggled a bit when we were marketing our play, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. We felt that, well, we wanted people to come to see good theater, to come to see professional theater, right? We didn't want them to come for a cause or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we were struggling whether to just put in the title Tintino, it's a theater play and that's it, or Tintino, it's the first inclusive play in a professional level in the history of El Salvador, which is what it is. Right. But do we put that, or is it, are we being more inclusive if we just invite people to a play, to a theater play? What do you think?
I think you can, there's no, I wish I could be like, here's your perfect answer. But the truth is, there's no perfect answer. The only thing you want to avoid is only talking about disability, right? Like if you're, of course, like if you're creating the first ever inclusive experience, like, yes, you should talk about that. But if you are like talking about why it's important that we see, like in some kind of marketing for your show, to talk about like, this is so important because literally this much of our population has a disability and we never see it on stage. Like we're here to like serve as a mirror, like let our show like give you a window into the true, like truest human experience. It just depends on how you want to talk about it, but there's no wrong way as long as you're not really, the only wrong way is like, never talking about like the actor, just talking about the disability the whole time. As long as you're talking about how it like highlights our shared humanity and not just like disability all the time, you're fine. Because you want to make sure that it talks about the inclusive nature, not just that you're doing it and that's cool.
Okay. Yeah. Great, thank you. Actually, disability is not a topic in the story of the play. You can actually not very visibly notice who's a regular and who has disabilities. Yeah. It's a story about it's about fantasy. We'll have our costumes, and yeah, it does not touch that topic. It's about the topics of war, of love, of pollution, but it doesn't focus on disability.
Talk about what it talks about, and then maybe you might mention, oh, by the way, it's the first ever inclusive production. Like, but exactly, give us the summary of the show. Like, give us what it's about instead of who it's about. That's important, and you can mention it once, but yeah, you don't need to mention it in every single thing you do all the time. But it does make your work pretty much way cooler than everyone else's. So you don't want to hide. You don't want to hide that you're doing it either.
Thank you. If I may piggyback on that, Allie, being Salvadorian,
Christina's from El Salvador, like me.
I live in the U.S., but I'm Salvador. So yeah. So being from El Salvador and being with a person with disability, I concur with what Allie has said, because if the play stands on its own, right, you are more inclusive than if you say it's an inclusive play, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And if you just say in the footnote, inclusive, that gets a whole lot of attention just automatically. And you're like, okay, we're representing the whole society. We're not representing one sector. We're representing the whole society. And because it's fantasy, who cares who has a disability, who doesn't? It's not a sense of, it's not the reality that the person lives with. It's the reality that the person imagines. So it's more freeing that way. We all want, as people with disabilities, to be free from our stereotypes. And if I can say that, then I think you're on the right track. I would love to see Tintino. I would love to see that. But if I have to go to El Salvador to see it, I will have to fly. I will have to fly for the first time to El Salvador. I have never gone since my grandmother left a while ago. I've never gone. So thank you.
We'd love to have you, or we could take it to you, whichever is easier.
I live in MA, so Massachusetts.
Oh,
so,
great.
So we can talk. We can discuss.
Let's do that.
Yes.
And also, if you guys can put your emails in the chat, I think it'd be great if we can start building a little community. Even though I know I'm sure there are a lot of communities already. Yeah, thank you so much, Christine.
Yep. Claro.
Yeah, it was such a great point, because I remember that I think that Evan had that conversation in the town hall, that he was saying that an article basically focused on all he was an amputee rather than all the things that he did. So the question was in that moment is like, when it comes to marketing as an artist, what weights more? Because you don't want to get like the
he wants to be an artist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody has any other question? All right. So,
Wow.
Allie, it's been a wonderful pleasure and an honor to have you here in this conversation, to open up and check our assumptions.
Yes, check them at the door. Thank you all so much for coming and learning and just taking this time. I think it's great that we have this time to learn and show up better when this is all over, and during, but of course. When our industry is back, like, let's build something great instead of like trying to fix what was already broken,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Allie. As always, we can also unmute our microphones to say like a final goodbye and final thank you all together. So let's do it right now. Let's unmute ourselves.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I just have like a minute to write all these emails down?
I can send them to you.
Cool.
I'm gonna try to just